Cranes can't shunt. Kevin is a crane vehicle who works hard at the workstation. His job is to load and unload trucks for Victor and the other engines to collect. Kevin is proud of his job, but can sometimes wish he had more to do around the yards. Sometimes he thinks he can be just as useful as a steam engine. One day, the workstation was very busy. Trucks were everywhere and they needed to be shunted. But there was a problem. Victor was in the shed being repaired. The men were doing their best to fix him up. "Your tubes need a thorough clean," said the workman, "but you won't be able to work until you are fixed, I'm afraid." "Oh no," groaned Victor. "Then someone will need to do my work while I'm being fixed." "No can do, Victor," said the foreman. "All the engines are busy, so the trucks will just have to wait." Victor felt very disappointed. He didn't want to be kept in the work shed. He wanted to be out in the yards shunting trucks. Just then, Kevin trundled in to see the foreman. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" The foreman turned to Kevin. "Just do your normal jobs today, please, Kevin," he replied. "Emily will arrive later to collect a flat bit of tools for the workmen at the waterworks." "Yes, sir," said Kevin. Then he turned to Victor. "I hope you get better soon," he smiled. Then he trundled away. "Thank you, Kevin," smiled Victor. But he wished he was well enough to say it properly. Kevin trundled around the yards collecting the tools to put on Emily's flatbed. But Kevin was worried about Victor. "I wish there was something we could do to help," he sighed. "All we can do is our work," said his driver. "That's all we can do for the moment." "But I'm sure we can do more than that," said Kevin. Then he looked at the waiting trucks. This gave Kevin an idea. "Maybe I could help shunt Victor's trucks for him," he suggested. "Then Victor could carry on from there." His driver laughed when he heard this. "Don't be ridiculous," he chuckled. "Cranes like you can't shunt trucks." "I could try," chugged Kevin. His driver just chuckled at the idea. Kevin just trundled off to start his work. Soon he was busy, working hard, collecting the tools for the workmen. The workmen made sure the tools were safely put onto the flatbed. Then, when Kevin loaded the last of the tools, Emily popped into the yards. She was pleased to see Kevin.
"Hello, Kevin,"
she whistled.
"I'm here to collect my flatbed."
Kevin gave a warm smile. "That's great, Emily," he said, "but I'm afraid you'll have to take the flatbed yourself today." Emily was puzzled.
"Why?"
she asked. Kevin told Emily about Victor being unwell and out of action for a while. "He won't be able to shunt any more of these trucks around the yards until he is better," Kevin explained. Emily felt very sorry for Kevin.
"Oh dear," she said. "That is bad news."
"I want to help Victor somehow," Kevin sighed. "I even want to shunt these trucks for him." Emily smiled at her friend.
"Kevin, I think it's best for you to leave these trucks for Victor to sort out," she said kindly. "You're not really the shunting kind."
"She's right, Kevin," put in Kevin's driver. "Now come along, we've got other work to do." Soon Emily was on her way out to the yards with her flatbed. Kevin went back to work, but he still couldn't stop thinking about shunting. He was determined to help Victor, so he raced back to the shed to see the foreman. "I'm going to ask if I can help with the shunting," he called to his driver. "Don't be silly," replied the driver. "You can ask if you want, but I doubt you'll get anywhere." When Kevin returned to the workstation, the workmen were still at work fixing Victor. He chugged to a stop right behind the foreman. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "Maybe I can help with Victor's work while he's being repaired." "How can you help?" he asked. He was puzzled. "I can help with the shunting," smiled Kevin. "I can do as much as I can until Victor is better." The foreman shook his head in dismay. "That's a very silly idea, Kevin," he said strictly. "You do just your own work and leave the trucks alone. Victor will do the shunting when the workmen have repaired him. But, stuttered Kevin. No buts, interrupted the foreman. Now go and sort out the rest of your jobs and leave the trucks alone.
Yes, sir,
sighed Kevin sadly, and he trundled sadly away out of the shed. As Kevin rolled around the yard, he felt down that he couldn't do any of the shunting. Then he saw the trucks he saw earlier. He stopped and looked at them. Kevin, leave the trucks, said his driver. You heard what the foreman said. But then Kevin had a thought. He thought about what all the engines had said. Everyone had told him not to touch the trucks. They had said for him to leave them until Victor was fixed. Finally, Kevin made a decision. That's it, he huffed. I don't care what anyone else says. I'm going to help shunt the trucks. His driver was surprised. No, Kevin, he said. These trucks are heavy. You won't be able to move them. I don't care how heavy they are, Kevin boomed. I want to help Victor. If we can make just a quick start, then he can take over the job from us with less work to do. His driver wasn't at all sure, but he didn't want to argue with Kevin, so he decided to agree. Very well, Kevin, he said, but if something goes wrong, you'll be the one in trouble. Remember that. I will, sir, said Kevin. So Kevin trundled up to a train of trucks that stood in front of him. Then his driver went to work fixing the cables. He tied a strong piece of cable to the front truck's coupling hook and tied the other end to Kevin's hook. After a few minutes, everything was ready. His driver climbed back into Kevin. All ready, Kevin, he said. Now remember, the trucks will be heavy, so don't pull too hard and take it easy. Yes, sir, agreed Kevin. So Kevin took a deep breath and slowly he took up the strain. He pulled as hard as he could, but the trucks didn't move an inch. Kevin tried again. He heaved, he pulled, and he pulled, but still the train didn't move. Kevin wasn't going to give up. I'm going to move this train no matter what it takes, he groaned. So he took up the strain again and gave a mighty heave. His wheels spun and his crane arm creaked and groaned. The cable groaned under the strain as he pulled with all his might. Then there was trouble. The cable creaked loudly and it started to break. Kevin didn't notice at all. His driver was starting to worry. Kevin, I don't think you're strong enough, he warned with caution. But Kevin didn't hear this. Suddenly, the cable snapped and Kevin shot backwards. He ran right into some milk wagons with a bang. Kevin rolled slowly forward and came to a stop. His driver climbed out of him and then saw what was happening. Milk was leaking from the truck and onto the track. Some milk sprayed onto Kevin. Now you've done it, he grumbled. Then, thinking quickly, he plugged the hole with his finger. Luckily, he was wearing gloves. He cleaned the milk around the hole with a piece of tissue, and then he pulled out of his pocket a blue plaster. He carefully put the plaster in front of the hole in the wagon. Finally, the milk had stopped leaking, and he then turned back to Kevin. That was lucky, he sighed, mopping his brow. Kevin didn't say a word. His crane arm ached and his engine hurt. I shall have to go and get help, said his driver, and he ran back to the work shed for help. The foreman was enjoying his cup of tea when Kevin's driver ran towards him. Kevin needs help, he said. He tried to move some trucks on his own and ended up damaging his engine. The foreman spat out his tea in shock. Right, he thundered. I'll get Harvey and he can bring a flatbed. He telephoned the Fat Controller and explained to him what had happened. The Fat Controller was surprised when he heard this. I'll send Harvey at once, and I'll come and speak to Kevin right away, he said sternly. Kevin sat sadly in front of the milk wagon, feeling very sad. He didn't feel happy with himself now. Oh dear, he sighed sadly. If only I had more strength inside me, then I could have moved that train without any trouble. Then he heard a familiar whistle. It was Harvey. He puffed up alongside Kevin and looked at the mess. "Goodness me," he grinned. "What's happened to you?" Kevin didn't answer. He felt silly. "Come on, let's get you back to the work shed," smiled Harvey. The breakdown train lifted Kevin off the ground and onto the flatbed. The workmen tied Kevin down to make sure he didn't fall off. Then Harvey puffed back down the track. Kevin was soon unloaded and the men were at work cleaning the milk off him. His driver was being checked by the doctor to see if he was hurt. The foreman was very cross with Kevin, and so was the fat controller. "Kevin," he said sternly, "you did a very silly thing trying to move those trucks out of the siding. Do you have any idea what kind of damage you have done?" "No, sir, I don't," said Kevin. "You broke a milk wagon and damaged your engine," said the fat controller. "You should have left the trucks in the siding like you were told to." Kevin gave a small sigh. "I was only trying to help, sir," he said. "I can understand that," said the foreman, "but you need to understand this. You are a crane, and cranes like you cannot shunt trucks like steam engines. You're not strong enough to move heavy trains of trucks. Thanks to your silly antic, you will be out of work for a while," put in the fat controller. "Harvey will have to do your jobs until you are fixed." Then the fat controller cleared his throat. Kevin was worried about what he was going to say next. "If you try something like that again," he ended, "I shall have to fix buffers to you to make sure you don't try anything like that ever again. That way, you can learn never to ignore orders, no matter what you think." "Yes, sir," said Kevin sadly. "I won't do it again, I'll promise." "See that you do," said the fat controller. "Otherwise, it's buffers for you." And the fat controller walked away, shaking his head. Then a workman came to the foreman with good news. "We're done, sir," he said. Sure enough, Victor gave a wheeze of steam and he blew a happy whistle. "How do you feel, Victor?" asked the foreman. "Much better, sir," smiled Victor. The foreman walked up to him. "Can you try and make up for lost time?" he asked. "Of course, sir," beamed Victor. And Victor puffed out of the shed and towards the shunting yards. Kevin watched as Victor puffed out of sight. He was now beginning to wish he hadn't tried to move the heavy trucks on his own. He felt terrible. Victor was soon at work shunting the trucks. He pushed and pulled the trucks around the yards. He worked very hard, and even his driver was impressed with him. "You sound like a different engine," he grinned. "I feel like a different engine," Victor chuffed. The trucks didn't cause any trouble for Victor, and this helped a lot. Victor took away the broken milk wagon and took it to the workman to be fixed. When Victor returned to the shed, the sun had almost set. He parked alongside Kevin. He could see Kevin was upset. Henry and James were there too. They had heard what had happened and they couldn't help but chuckle. "What's this I hear about you trying to move trucks?" sniggered Henry.
You should have those buffers fitted to you,
teased James.
then you can be called Kevin the Crane Engine.
Kevin felt very embarrassed. Victor blew his whistle loudly. "Enough!" he cried. Henry and James went quiet. Kevin took a deep breath. "I'm sorry I caused you so much trouble," he apologised. "I was only trying to help you." "I understand, Kevin," said Victor, "but you really should have obeyed orders in the first place." "I just feel that I can do more than just load and unload trucks," explained Kevin. "Sometimes I can just get bored with my jobs. I want to be really useful, just like you." Victor smiled at Kevin. He understood what Kevin was trying to say. "But you are really useful, my friend," he said. "You're really useful in your own way, and that makes you special." Henry and James agreed. Kevin thought about this for a moment. Then he gave a little smile. "So I am really useful after all," he smiled. Of course you are, said Victor. Your jobs are what make you really useful. But please, no more trying to shunt trucks, he went on. Otherwise you'll end up in buffers. Everyone laughed. Kevin gave a little chuckle. Thank you, Victor, he smiled happily. From now on I shall leave the heavy shunting to you. Thank you, Kevin, smiled Victor. I hope you've learned your lesson today. I have, said Kevin. I will never try to shunt trucks again. Never, ever. All the engines smiled at Kevin, and Kevin was pleased to have learnt a very important lesson indeed.